Right, it's a top story of the day. The South Africa Investment Conference underway in Sandton. SABC News International editor Sophie Mokiena is there with the head of the African Development Bank Group, Adesina. Let's cross live to her now.
Thank you so much, Nzinga. As you are aware that the South African president is hosting many delegates, both from South Africa and also outside South Africa, particularly on the continent. The intention is simple. South Africa is open for business, and President Ramaphosa, as a person who often calls for international investors to invest in South Africa, is also engaging the multinational institutions that are financing projects around the world, but particularly here in the continent. With me, I have the president of the African Development Bank. Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Good afternoon, good to see you.
You visiting South Africa at a time where the continent in general has experienced challenges in terms of the COVID-19. As an institution that deals with financing, what are your observations? How have we been impacted on in terms of the COVID-19?
Well, you know, COVID-19 was actually one of those things that nobody saw coming, but we had to adjust to it. Immediately COVID-19 actually hit, the African Development Bank Board of Directors approved a crisis response facility for us, which was for $10 billion to support African countries. Which was a fast disbursing mechanism to support them to deal with the fiscal challenges that they were having. They had to invest in health care infrastructure, investing also in PPEs, and also making sure that they could get testing kits. You know, we didn't have any of these things, so we were able to support them. We provided, for example, for South Africa, about $383 million to support South Africa's effort, which the President Cyril Ramaphosa launched to support the recovery from COVID-19. Now, in terms of what we see, and I think basically we have done better than we used to do in the beginning. Now we have roughly about almost 16% of Africa's population vaccinated. That's still a lot lower than what we wanted it to be, but we have made a lot of progress. Now, at the African Development Bank, our board of directors recently approved for us a new strategy to invest in healthcare infrastructure. Basically, we have to see that the recovery from COVID is going to be a long-term thing, but we have to keep our eyes on three things. First is we must revamp quality healthcare infrastructure, primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, and tertiary healthcare. Secondly is that we must revamp Africa's pharmaceutical industry. You know, Africa today imports about 80% of all the medicines that it uses, so that doesn't make any sense. But also we have to build Africa's capacity for manufacturing of vaccines, which you're really doing very well here. And I want to really salute President Cyril Ramaphosa for that. You know, Africa currently only imports about 99% of all the vaccines. It doesn't really make sense. So we are, as an African Development Bank, going to be investing roughly a little bit over about roughly $3 billion to support Africa's pharmaceutical industry, but also the vaccine manufacturing. I want to use the opportunity to really commend President Cyril Ramaphosa for the global leadership that he has actually demonstrated, you know, in raising awareness about this, in attracting companies to come into South Africa, the Biovacs, and also the Aspen Pharmaceutical here to invest in, with Johnson & Johnson, investing in them to produce about 300 million doses. That is really great. So I think the recovery process in Africa has started. We had an investment forum last week where we were able to mobilize investment interest of roughly $32.4 billion for Africa. So we're back.
Mr. President, you touched on manufacturing. Let's move to energy. The continent is really struggling. South Africa, a case in point. What are you doing to assist countries to have that kind of capacity? I mean, we have water, different dams around the continent where we can perhaps power ourselves in terms of hydroelectric power, and also taking into consideration the climate change and the commitments that have been made by our leaders on the continent. In terms of investment, can you share with us what you have done in that sector?
I always say that power, electricity is like the your backbone. If you have a backbone, you can stand straight. If you don't have a backbone, you can't. No economy can run without having access to power. Now, the African Development Bank, we have a big program that's called New Deal for Energy for Africa. We are investing over a 10-year period, $25 billion in the energy sector. Today, as the African Development Bank, over the last 5 years that we've been running our work, we have provided access to electricity for a little over 21 million people that are having access to electricity. Second is that we focus a lot on renewable energy. You know, if you look at our portfolio in the energy sector, we have 83% of our portfolio is in renewable energy. So you're looking at solar, you're looking at wind, you're looking at geothermal, right? And we finance the world's largest concentrated solar power plant, which is in Morocco, right? We finance the Lake Turkana, which is in Kenya, the largest wind power mill in Africa. And right here in South Africa, we've invested over $3.8 billion in support of ESCOM, for example. Also for ESCOM's financing, but also we are now moving into renewable energy because Africa has great sunshine. I mean, God is good to us. We have great sunshine, we have a lot of water. We just have to make sure we're turning it into energy. So right here in South Africa, we moved our focus into renewable energy. We supported the SAIC 100 megawatts, the concentrated solar power plant, which is for about $69 million. Then we went into the Adesina 100 megawatts, also power, solar, for about $97 million. Then we provided for Redstone, solar power for about $152 million. And I must congratulate South Africa because the Redstone solar power was named the best Africa Renewable Energy Project of the Year. So now we are in engagement with South Africa as President Ramaphosa has laid a very bold vision to transition into net zero and therefore get out of coal. And I said to him in my address this morning that the African Development Bank will mobilize, do three things. First, we'll provide $500,000 of technical assistance support to National Treasury as they're trying to do that. Second, we'll provide $5 million to ESCOM as part of this Just Energy Transition program. But in addition to that, we are working with partners, including G7 countries, who have mobilized about $8.5 billion to support the Just Energy Transition. And we have put forward a program to the government of South Africa, because we want to really support the government, that will allow the government, in working together with the G7 countries, and the $8.5 billion already provided for grants, concessional financing, to mobilize $27 billion for South Africa to make that energy transition. So you can see we're doing a lot in renewable energy.
You spoke about the G7. I know that the G7 leaders are meeting. Yes, of course, on the agenda is Ukraine. We are not immune to this crisis in Eastern Europe. As a bank, what's your assessment in terms of how will this impact on us, particularly on issues or sectors such as energy, in terms of oil and food as well? What is the bank doing? Because we have another crisis that just came up, and prepared as we are, and the same way we were not prepared for the pandemic. Now, what are you doing to ensure that you cushion the continent against this crisis now?
Yeah, you know, the war in Ukraine, every time I turn on my television, it makes me so sad to see the level of devastation of a very, very good country. It's a meaningless war as far as I'm concerned. And I see Africans are very well seriously affected. We've got lots of students that are actually caught up in all of this situation. But when it comes to this impact of this war, it is a global impact. If you come back to Africa, we have to see the impact in terms of food, for example. Russia and Ukraine supply well over 54% of all of the wheat and of the maize that we have. We import in Africa. For maize, for example, I know you eat maize a lot here. They also eat it in Eastern African countries, Kenya and everywhere else. Ukraine accounts for 31% of all the maize imports to Africa. The price of wheat has gone up by 64% globally. It's gone back to the level it was when we had the 2008 global food crisis. Now, the price of fertilizers have gone up by 300%. Energy prices have gone up. So you're looking at a major impact that's going to come in terms of food price inflation. That's going to be very, very serious. And if we don't take action quickly, we may actually be facing a food crisis. So to avert that, the African Development Bank, we moved very rapidly. In fact, we worked all of last week very, very hard to put together an emergency food production plan that will run in the next season, starting cropping season, that will allow Africa to produce roughly 30 million metric tons of food in terms of wheat, in terms of soybeans, maize, and rice. And we have the platforms to do this. You know, we have something called the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. It's a platform for getting technologies to farmers at scale. We used it to support Sudan with wheat. And let me tell you what happened. We provided Sudan with 65,000 metric tons of seed of heat-tolerant wheat varieties. Wheat is a temperate crop, but we've been able to develop varieties that are heat-tolerant. You can grow them in Africa very, very easily. We provided them with 65,000 metric tons of seed. Now, just to give you an idea of what that is, if you take an A380 Airbus aircraft, the cargo, the fuel, and the passengers, is roughly 98.4 metric tons. So you're looking at 666 A380 Airbus on a landing strip. That's how much seed we give them. And guess what happened? They produced 1.5 million metric tons of wheat, and they cut back their wheat import by half in just 2 crop seasons. We've done that also for them in Ethiopia. So I am confident that as we mobilize, we've said we want to mobilize $1 billion to reach 20 million farmers in Africa to produce 30 million metric tons of food. And that will save us quite a lot of, maybe about another $12 billion in terms of the cost of importing the food. So when you were asking the question, you said when COVID struck, we were not ready. Yes, we were not. But for this one, to deal with the impact of food in Africa and to avert impact on inflation, we are fully ready. We have the program, we have the technologies. We're just trying to raise the financing to make sure that we can secure food supply in Africa and decouple Africa from this major impact of this war in Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. That was the president of the African Development Bank talking to us here at the Sandton Convention Center about what the bank is doing to assist countries on the continent, particularly during this time where we are dealing with the impact of the COVID-19, but also now another big crisis, the war in Ukraine.
Sophie Mokiena, SABC News International editor, updating us from the Sandton Convention Center there. So it's time for a short break.